Hello everyone. Welcome to Marking Up with HTML for Beginners. I'm Amit Kumar and this is the 18th tutorial, Absolute versus Relative URLs. So friends, in our previous tutorial, we have discussed about URLs and paths, and in this tutorial, we are going to discuss about two types of URLs that we are going to deal in our HTML. These are absolute and relative URLs. So let's see what they are. Absolute URLs. It points to a location defined by its absolute location on the web, including protocol and domain name. For example, if a details.html page is uploaded to a directory called courses that sits inside the root of a web server and the website's domain is https://www.propertutorials.in, the page would be available at this certain URL. An absolute URL will always point to the same location no matter where it's used. Now let's suppose there is a file details.html. Now this certain file is part of a folder. The name of that folder or directory is courses. Now this certain directory or folder is available at the root of the web server. And to access the web server's root, we know we need to type in the domain name. Now, for example, the domain of this server is this one. Fine. So the whole scenario is like, this is the domain name. Now on this server, there is a folder named as courses, and inside that folder, there is a file known as details.html. So the absolute URL for this certain file will have the name of the domain, the name of the directory, as well as the name of the resource. And you know what? No matter where you are using this URL, for this certain resource, the URL is always going to remain same. And that's why this is known as absolute URL. The second form of URL are relative URLs. Now, relative URLs points to a location that is relative to the file you are linking from, as we have seen in the previous tutorial. So if you remember, in my previous tutorial, I have shown you how you are going to provide the value to the href depending upon various positions of the file. Now those URLs that we have used in the previous tutorial are all relative URLs. A relative URL will point to different places depending upon the actual location of the file we refer from. Now we need to be careful while using relative URLs, as the same resource will have different relative URLs depending upon from where we are referring it. Now, unlike absolute URLs, the relative URL is not fixed for a resource. Actually, relative URLs depends on the position of the resource to the file where you are using the URL. So that means if you are referring to the same resource from different positions, definitely the URL will change all the time. Now before moving on and discussing the differences between them and deciding which one to be used, let me show you a practical example of each one of them. So I have opened my Notepad++ and clearly you can see in tutorial 18, I have created two folders, courses and images. In courses, there are two files, course1.html, which is having this title course1 and heading course1. Courses is also having course2.html, in which I have written title as course2 as well as heading as course2. In images folder, there is image page.html, in which I have written title as my image page and heading as my image page. And similarly, there is another page, main page.html, and this one is inside tutorial 18. Now let me show you the files and folders in the file system. Now here you can see in tutorial 18, there are two folders, courses and images. Courses having two files, course1 and course2. Images having one file, image page.html, and there is another file, main page.html inside tutorial 18. Now what I'm going to do, actually I want to refer these two course files, course1.html and course2.html, with the help of relative and absolute URL, and I'm going to provide that URL in the main page.html. So let me show you that. Now in the my main page, I'm going to create two more headings. So they will be h2, and inside this heading, I will mention absolute and relative URLs. Now here I will provide an anchor for absolute URL, and we are going to link to course 1 as well as course 2. So I will create two anchors, course 1 and course 2. Now definitely, as I have to provide absolute URL over here, I will use href and I will note down the absolute URL. Now to show you what will be the absolute URL for course 1 and course 2, let me run these pages on the web browser. So let me open course1.html and let me run it on the Chrome. Now here you can find the absolute URL, because right now we are not running the web page on the web server. So it will give me the URL of the file system itself. So let me copy this URL from here and let me paste it in the main page. So here I will provide the href, and to the href I will provide this URL. Fine. And now what we can do, we can run this on the Chrome, and here is our absolute URL. So let me click on it, and clearly we have landed to course 1. Now as I told you, absolute URLs are always same. So this URL will remain same even if we provide it to some other place, right? And similarly, there will be a URL for course 2 as well. And I will paste it in another tag, another anchor tag, and there I will change the name of the file. So it will be course2.html. So this is the absolute URL for these two files. Now the color of these tags are changed. So there might be some error in this line. So let's go at the end of the line. Okay, I forgot to close the string. So let me close this one. And the problem is resolved. So now these two are absolute URLs that we are having. Even if you want to change the line, you can use the BR so that these URLs should be in new line. And now let's see the relative URLs to these positions. Like I'm copy pasting these anchor tags, but definitely I will change the value of the href. Now instead of providing this whole path, I will provide only the name of the file, right? While you are providing the relative URL, you should know from where you are referring to that file. If you remember, right now I am in the my main page, right? And the main page and courses folder are at the same place. So definitely I can access the subdirectory by specifying the subdirectory name and then by specifying the name of the file. Now let me run this. And clearly you can see these are absolute URLs. So let me click on it and it will open the file. And let me click on a relative URL whether it is working or not. And you will come to know that it's also working and it is also opening the same file only. So here I have shown you the absolute and relative URL. Now let's suppose I want to provide these URLs. I want to provide these hyperlinks to the image page.html. So let me copy them. And let me paste it in the image page.html. So all that we need to do is to paste them. And now let me run this particular page. So I will click on run, click on launch in Chrome. And now you can see this is also showing the same result which my main page was showing. But they are two different pages. You can check the heading by yourself. Now in the my image page, let's click on this absolute URL. So it's working, it's opening that course 1. But let's see what happened when we click on relative URL. So you can see it's printing file not found. It's unable to find out the file. Now you can see the URL by yourself. Actually, in the images folder, it's going to the courses folder. Now there is no courses folder inside images folder, right? There is no subfolder like courses inside images. Then why it is trying to open that? Actually, it's because of our relative URL. Now the relative URL in the image page will be different from the relative URL in the main page. Now why so? It's because of the position of these pages. Main page is there inside the tutorial 18 folder. Hence, this courses folder and main page are residing at the same place. But if we talk about image page.html, it belongs to images folder, and images folder and courses folder are two different subdirectories of the same parent. So if we want to provide relative URL to the image page, first of all, we have to go back to the parent, that means tutorial 18, and then we have to open the courses folder. In the previous tutorial, I told you how to do that. So 2 dots and a slash. Here also we will provide 2 dots and a slash. And now let's run this page. And now if you will click on this course 1 relative URL, it will also work. Even this course 2 will also work. Now you know that in the images folder there is image page.html, which is actually referring to these course 1 and course 2.html belonging to a different folder. Now in case if I change the position of this file, So let me create one folder here known as sample, and let me paste this image page.html inside the sample. So let me copy and let me paste it here. And let me also rename this file. Okay, so to rename this file, I'm going back to the file system and I'm renaming it and I'm making it as imagepage2.html. So definitely the file name is changed, and now there are two files. Let me name it as my image page 2. Here also my image page 2. Fine. And let me run this one. Launch in Chrome. Definitely it is the my image page 2. And now if I will try to click on this relative URL, again error, file not found. Now the case is, because we have changed the position of the file, the relative URL break in between and it's not possible for it to open the file. And let me show you that absolute URL as well. So let's click on it and this is working. That means absolute URL will work and it will not break in between even if you have changed the position of the file. But that's not true with relative URL. Hence, they don't break. Absolute URL don't break when a page is moved, and even it is less error prone. However, we should use relative links wherever possible while linking to other locations within the same website. So my suggestion would be, when you are linking to the same website, when you are linking to a resource of the same website, try to use always a relative link. Okay. And when you are linking to any other website, then only use the absolute link. Now you might be wondering why. And to explain you that, let me tell you some benefits that we get with relative URL. The first benefit that we get is relative URLs are generally shorter than absolute URLs, and you have seen that in your practical example. And because of the first benefit, it provides us another benefit, which is it's easier to read because of the previous point only. If you are having a shorter URL, definitely it would be much easier for you to read. Now it's more efficient to use relative URL wherever possible. Why? As every request to absolute URLs must go through a long path from client to browser to DNS, then to web server. Now, as you will grow older in web development, you will come to know that how relative URL is benefiting us. But definitely, let me tell you, an absolute URL actually slows down the performance because of this long path of request, whereas relative URLs perform much better. So that was all which I want to discuss with you about relative and absolute URLs. In the next tutorial, we are going to talk about few resources which are not HTML resources, but we can use them as a link and we can even download them as and when required. But that marks the end of this tutorial. Hope to meet you in the next video tutorial. Till then, thank you and happy programming.